We've spent a lot of time so far in this course looking at how to use Postman to explore and investigate APIs. You can, of course, also use it to do test automation, and that's what we're going to start looking at in this section. We're going to look at automating API tests. So for this video, we're going to get started kind of at one of the starting points in Postman, which is using collections. And so the reason we want to start here is that when you write automation tests, so regression tests that you're going to run over and over, you need to take a little bit of a different approach than you do with exploratory testing. A lot of the same principles apply, which is why we started with that stuff, but there's some additional things you need to consider as well. And one of those things is being organized. So you need to have a little bit more of an organized approach. Making automated tests takes more work, both creating them in the first place and also maintaining them as time goes on. And so you need to be more careful about what tests you're putting in, and then also about understanding how they work. So the way that Postman helps you with this organization is with something called collections. Now, if we look here in Postman, we can see we can add a collection here, and it's got this folder-looking icon, which is probably because it's a way that Postman is telling you you can organize your tests. You can group stuff, similar things together in this. So let's create a collection here. Let's just call this test collection. And you can see here some of the different options that we have on these different tabs. So the first thing we have here is a description. So if we wanted to, we could put a description in here that tells what this test is doing, what this collection is doing. And then we can move over here to the authorization. We'll leave the description for now. So this authorization tab allows you to specify authorization in similar ways as we have already talked about in this course, but it lets you do so in a way that applies to all the tests in your collection. And so you can see how this would be powerful. Most of the time on your API, your authorization is going to be the same for every call. And so you only need to specify it once here, and then it will automatically be picked up in all the tests that you put in your collection. The next thing we have here is pre-request scripts. So this one is a spot where you can create scripts that will execute before every test in your collection. So if there were some minor things that you wanted to do before each test, you could do it here. An example of that might be that you want to generate a random string to use in your test. If you wanted to do that, you could create a random string generator in the script area and then pass that in, and it could be used in every test in this collection, and each test would regenerate a new random string. So we'll dig a little bit more into how to do some scripting and stuff in Postman later. But for now, just understand that you can do this. You can create these scripts that can run before each test. And then we have this tab called tests, which isn't quite what you think it would be. It's actually scripts again, but these are scripts that will run after every request or every test. So I've been calling them tests up until now. I think to me that's a little more intuitive, but in Postman they're called requests. So you have a collection, and the collection has multiple requests in it. And then what Postman is calling tests are the things that check for certain things to be there in your test. So an example of something you might do here, if you had all the requests in your collection were going to, or should be returning 200s, so they should be giving back a 200 status code, you could put something in here that says, make sure that my test gave back a 200 status code. By doing that here, it would automatically execute after every single request in your collection. And so once again, this is a powerful way to automate, a powerful way to help you consolidate your stuff so that it's easier to maintain in the future. And we'll dig into this a little more in future videos as well, how to actually write some scripts that work in here. And the final tab we have here is the variables tab. And on the variables tab, we have another powerful concept that Postman gives us. It lets us define variables that we can use for all the tests or all the requests in our set. So this can be very helpful if you have something that changes. So for example, maybe we're running a set of tests on an API. In this case, we'll use, let's pretend it's an actual API. So let's go look at an API here, and we can go look at random user.me. And this is an API, an open source API that lets you generate random user information that you might want to use in other tests. You can see down here there's a lot of information about that API. One of the options that this API takes is nationality. So you can just do full request like this, or you can pass in nationality option to it. So maybe we want to try our set with different nationalities. So we could create a variable here that's called nationality, and we'll give it an initial value of CA because Canadian is a good nationality to pick, right, for our first one. Then later on, we'll be able to change this value, and then all the tests could run again with that new value. So we could change this to US or EN or UK or some other country that is not Canada. And if we set up our test correctly, we'll be able to run through the test using that different variable. So again, this is a very powerful way to allow you to make it easy to run multiple tests and to maintain those tests. So at this point, you should have a pretty good idea of how to use collections in Postman.